Have you ever wondered what actually keeps a massive organization from just, spinning completely off the tracks? What are those invisible guardrails that guide thousands of employees to make the right decisions every single day? Well, welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving deep into the absolutely crucial role of business policies. More specifically, we're going to see how they fit into a really powerful framework known as the PLUS model. So let's jump right in.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start by untangling strategy versus policy. Then we'll see how policies connect the top of the org chart to the bottom. After that, we'll introduce the PLUS ethical model, really zoom in on P for policies, and finally, figure out how to use them to eliminate those tricky ethical gray areas.
All right, first up, strategy versus policy. Let's untangle this corporate jargon right off the bat, because honestly, these two terms get confused all the time, but they serve completely different purposes.
There is a massive difference between setting a direction and setting boundaries. According to our sources, a strategy is your comprehensive master plan. It's the course of action designed to achieve the overall mission. Think of it as your roadmap for maximizing opportunities while minimizing threats. It's heavily outward-looking, meaning you're always keeping an eye on the environment and your competition. Now, on the flip side, policies are the broad internal guidelines that direct decision-making. They're what link that big, lofty strategy to its actual implementation on the ground. A policy is generally an inward-looking document. And here's a key distinction. A policy doesn't have an expiry date, whereas a strategy is almost always bound by specific timelines.
To put that into perspective, think of it like a cricket team. The overall strategy might be something like developing all-rounders in a cricket team to build a more versatile roster. But the specific short-term implementation of that, the actual tactic or procedure out on the pitch, would be sending Irfan Pathan out to bat at position number 3. The strategy is the big picture objective, right? The tactics and procedures are the exact step-by-step actions taken to actually execute it.
Moving on to the role of business policies. Let's see exactly how these policies function within an organization's hierarchy to keep everything moving smoothly.
The thing is, strategy just can't execute itself. It requires a cascading loop. At the very top, you have the strategy, which feeds directly into the business policy. The policy acts as this crucial bridge. It takes that high-level strategic intent and translates it down into real boundaries and guidelines. Those policies then cascade even further down into the specific processes and procedures at the operational level. It's a continuous flow, literally connecting top management's vision all the way down to the daily, routine tasks of the employees on the floor.
And well-written, effective policies do a few absolutely critical things. First, they provide clear top-down guidance so employees aren't constantly knocking on their boss's door for routine decisions. The policy already dictates what the acceptable action is. Also, because they don't expire, they offer incredible long-term stability, at least until they're specifically amended. And they exist on multiple levels, trickling down from overarching corporate parent policies right into very specific department-level child policies, which ensures total alignment from top to bottom.
All right, Section 3, the PLUS ethical model. Now that we're solid on what policies actually are, let's introduce the ultimate stress test for evaluating ethical dilemmas in the workplace.
The PLUS model is a highly practical framework. Whenever a business or even an individual employee faces a really complex decision or a murky ethical dilemma, this model provides a structured way to evaluate the entire situation. What makes it so effective is that it forces you to look at the problem across multiple categories all at the same time, rather than just kind of relying on a gut feeling.
It breaks down into 4 distinct pillars. P stands for policies, the internal rules and procedures of the organization itself. L stands for legal. These are the external laws and regulations that absolutely must be followed, no questions asked. U stands for universal, meaning the overarching business values, the corporate culture, and even the broader regional culture that apply to everyone. And finally, S stands for self, an individual's own personal moral compass and standards of right and wrong. Whenever you're facing a dilemma, you run it through all 4 of these filters.
So definitely lock this in. P-L-U-S. Policies, legal, universal, self. Before a major move is made, you check the internal rules, you check the external laws, the cultural expectations, and your own ethics. Honestly, every single time a strategic decision is considered, an organization really needs to run it through this exact framework.
Which brings us to Section 4. For the rest of this explainer, we are going to hyper-focus on that very first pillar of the model. P is for policies. And the reason we're doing that is because it's the one pillar the organization has the most direct control over. There's a great quote from our sources that hits the nail on the head. Policies are internal, legal is external. It's a simple distinction, but a huge one. While a company obviously can't just change the laws of the country it operates in, it has absolute authority over its internal policies. The P in the plus model is quite literally the organization's customized rulebook.
And this internal control gives the P pillar incredible power. Because these policies are established directly by the company, they become the primary tool used to determine precisely what is acceptable and what is unacceptable behavior within those specific corporate walls. But they're not just a boring, dusty rulebook. They actively mold the character, the climate, and the public identity of the organization. Think about it, a strict zero-tolerance policy, a really robust sustainability initiative. That literally shapes the daily reality and culture of the entire workplace.
Our sources provided a fantastic real-world example of this. Walmart's response to the COVID-19 pandemic back in early 2020. They were navigating a massive operational dilemma. To get through it, they had to rely on external legal and health guidance, so the L and U of the plus model, following CDC recommendations for social distancing and cleaning protocols. But they blended this with aggressive internal policy, the P, which placed a massive emphasis on strengthening their supply chains to meet completely unprecedented demand. By utilizing their internal policies proactively to protect both operations and staff, they saw huge market share gains. We're talking an incredible 460% growth in their grocery app downloads. It was policy that guided them through the crisis.
And that leads perfectly into our final section, eliminating ethical gray areas. Let's explore how these policies actually function on the ground when the rules aren't entirely clear.
So think about your own workplace for a second. Have you ever noticed these normal operating procedures that everyone just seems to follow, but they aren't actually written down anywhere? Our sources point out that a lot of times procedures are just understood as, how we do things around here. But these unwritten rules create really dangerous gray areas. Because when a real dilemma arises, employees are left wondering, wait, do I actually have to do it this way, or is it optional?
The whole goal of the P in the plus model is to drag an organization out of those messy, unwritten gray areas and push them into formalized, black and white clarity. Gray areas are informal. They're highly ambiguous, and they leave a lot of room for problematic behavior to just slide right by unnoticed. But by establishing formalized policies, management essentially deletes that ambiguity. They draw crystal clear boundaries between what is acceptable and unacceptable, giving employees a definitive standard to evaluate their daily choices against.
Now, fixing a gray area isn't a one-and-done deal. It's a continuous loop. First, you have to actually spot the ambiguity. Then, you formulate a policy that aligns with your organizational goals. Next, you roll it out so it reaches everyone on the ground floor. And finally, and this is crucial, you evaluate its effect over time. Business environments are volatile. They're always changing, right? So your policies need to adapt with them through regular audits and feedback loops.
We're going to wrap up today's explainer with a thought that brings the entire plus model full circle. We've talked a lot about P, policies. But remember S, self, the individual moral compass? When you're navigating a dilemma using the plus model, you always have to ask yourself, does your own moral compass actually align with the internal policies of your organization? Because if the P and the S are in constant conflict, well, it might be a sign that those organizational guardrails are leading you somewhere you really don't want to go. Definitely something to think about the next time you log on or clock in. Thanks so much for joining me, and keep learning.